Space planning and furniture layout, a sometimes challenging but vitally important step in designing a space. A well-planned interior is both functional and aesthetically pleasing, so you want to get this right. In this video, I'm going to share some of my process and how I go about planning a space, as well as some tips and tricks to help you succeed in doing this yourself. So, here we go. The tools. Now, before you can begin the process, you of course need a way to actually do the planning. There are lots of space planning apps and programs if you want to do this digitally, but I personally am a little bit old school when it comes to this. I am sort of a grid paper and pencil kind of girl, but you can use whatever method works best for you. When my job was staging show homes, I used to have to plan furniture layouts for entire houses, and I usually went about this by printing a copy of the blueprints and then going through them room by room, sketching out to scale where all of the furniture would be located. And that's just what worked best for me. Function. Before you begin planning, you need to assess how you need the space to function. This is probably the most important part of this entire process because even the most beautiful space is not a successful design if it doesn't function the way that you need it to. Really give a lot of consideration to how you plan to utilize the space. And be honest with yourself. Don't set up your space to work for a hypothetical version of your life that you know isn't accurate. It doesn't make sense to plan the perfect space for reading when what you know you'll actually be doing in that room is watching TV 90% of the time. Your home needs to work for your lifestyle. Start with the essentials. What are the non-negotiables for the room? I mean, you know your bedroom is always going to need a bed, and your living room is always going to have a sofa. Not only are these typically the most important pieces in the space, they are also usually the largest, and you want to begin this process by placing the biggest items first. Once you have those large anchor pieces sorted, you can start figuring out where to place the smaller secondary ones. If you're purchasing any new furniture and you haven't selected those items yet, do a little research into common sizes and use those estimates for your planning. As you continue along in the planning process and you figure out what's working or what's not working, you can tweak these things as needed. Having pre-planned the space before you begin purchasing anything is a really helpful way to ensure that you're making smart purchases that are going to work for you. Attempting to buy a new sofa, dining table, or bed without a proper furniture plan is just going to lead to buyer's remorse. If you have a challenging space and you're finding it difficult to lay out your furniture effectively, try to think outside the box and get creative. Sometimes the best solutions are not the obvious ones. I once worked on a show home that had a really narrow dining space, and I ended up ordering a custom-sized glass top to work with an existing base, just so I could ensure that I had something narrow enough to fit comfortably in the room. Another great option for a small dining space or a breakfast nook is a banquette. Because the bench is tight to the wall, it takes up less space and has a smaller footprint than if you had chairs all the way around the table. Proper clearances. If you're new to space planning, you might have some questions about clearances. How far out should your coffee table be from your sofa? What height do the stools at your kitchen island need to be? Most of this info can be found in a quick Google search, but if you really want to geek out on space planning, there is an excellent book that will provide you with pretty much every dimension you could ever wish to know for designing an interior space. Human Dimension and Interior Space by Julius Pinheiro and Martin Zelnick. I'll put the info in the description. This is like the Bible of space planning. I've been using it since it was on our textbook list in college. Oh, and let me just clear up those couple of questions for you right now. Your coffee table should be roughly 18 inches in front of your sofa, and as far as stool heights are concerned, a counter stool has a standard seat height of 24 inches and is designed to use with a standard 36-inch high countertop. A bar stool has a seat height of 30 inches and is designed to use with a raised counter of 42 inches. Traffic flow. Remember to consider the flow of traffic in your space. Moving around your home should not become an obstacle course. You don't want to block pathways through your rooms. It is all about function. Purposeful furniture. How can the furniture you choose be more functional? If you're short on storage space, maybe instead of a console table, you use a chest of drawers. The footprint can be the same, but it's going to better meet your needs. If you're the kind of person who likes to put your feet up on the coffee table a lot, maybe you want to think about using an ottoman there instead. In your dining room, if you feel like your dining table is not big enough, maybe instead of a china cabinet, you buy a sideboard, and then you have an extra surface you can serve from. If in your bedroom you're lacking closet space, think about using a wardrobe instead of a dresser. You don't want to overlook vertical space when you're planning, and this is a great example of how you can use height to your advantage. Scale. Scale is another important consideration when you are planning the layout of a space. You want the proportions of what you put in the room to feel balanced within the room. In a small space, sometimes the assumption is that the pieces within it should also be small, but that can actually throw off the sense of balance. You need to consider how much negative space you're leaving around the objects in your room. There should be enough that the pieces can breathe, but not so much that they feel small and under scale. And be conscious of walls. Not every piece of furniture should be pushed up against the wall. Again, it's about letting those pieces breathe, and it's also about using your floor space. And when it comes to floor space, area rugs are your friend. And remember the rules of thumb for sizing of area rugs. In your living room, you want it to be large enough that the front legs of your sofa and your chairs can sit comfortably on top. In the bedroom, you want the majority of your bed to be on top of the rug, but your nightstands and your dresser don't have to. In fact, you usually want enough space between the rug and the walls that your case goods don't sit on the rug. And in the dining room, you want to make sure that your rug is large enough that you can easily pull the chairs in and out without them catching on the edge of the rug. Another element that can impact balance in a space is height. You don't want all of the objects in your room to all be the same height. You want to have variations between higher and lower pieces, and this is going to keep your eye moving around the room. Sightlines. Sightlines are another consideration when you are space planning. If you have a big picture window with a pleasant view, you want to arrange your furniture in a way that's going to take advantage of that. Well, at least try to take advantage when you can. I have been in a lot of homes where, unfortunately, the only logical location for a sofa is the wall with the window. And in situations where a large object, like a sofa, is not placed against a wall, try avoiding placing it in a way that disrupts flow and cuts off the view to the space beyond it. And when you are seeing the back of a sofa, break up that solid expanse by placing a console behind it. Open concept spaces. So what do you do when you're planning for a large open concept space? One large furniture grouping in a big room can feel overwhelming. A better option is to divide the space up into zones, and each zone can serve a different function. Using area rugs is a great way to anchor each zone without breaking up sightlines. If you do want to give the appearance of walls to better define the space, try using furniture to achieve this. Open bookcases or decorative screens can be great options. Lighting considerations. Don't forget about lighting when you're planning your space. You want to be able to evenly distribute light sources throughout the room. Incorporate tables where lamps can sit, or tuck floor lamps into spaces without tables. And in smaller spaces where light placement is more limited, you could also look at wall sconces. Another tip about lighting when it comes to your dining room. The shape of the fixture over your dining table does impact the shape of the table. If you have a long linear light fixture, it does dictate that your table needs to be rectangular. To have a linear light fixture above a round dining table is going to feel really awkward. In the case of a round table, you're going to want to stick to either a round or a square light fixture. A rectangular table is usually your most flexible option, as it will typically work with a round, square, or a linear fixture. Okay, let's go there. Let's talk about televisions when it comes to furniture placement. A lot of designers really dislike TVs, and I get it. They're not aesthetically pleasing, but we have to be realistic about how people live. And if you want a TV in your room, have a TV. Now, should you plan your entire room around a television? Maybe not, unless of course it is a home theater or rec room where the primary function of the space is to watch TV. Now, in your living room, if placing your sofa across from your TV is not the best use of space, then it's usually best not to do it. You can still watch TV even if your TV is perpendicular to your sofa. You can look into getting a wall mount that pivots. We have one in our living room and it has been really great. And what about the dreaded TV above the fireplace? If you have the option to avoid it, I would try to. But I do acknowledge that there are times, especially in really open concept spaces, where there just aren't places to put a TV other than above your fireplace. So consider all of the options and do what works for you and your space. If you have the ability to conceal your TV when not in use, there are some people who have found really clever ways to do this. And yes, of course, there are frame TVs, and I know that not everyone is a fan of these. They're meant to look like a piece of art. They're not necessarily always that convincing, but I do think that they are a better alternative than having a big black rectangle on your wall. And one more tip to keep in mind, even if you have done all of your space planning and your furniture layouts, and you know that the pieces you've selected will fit in your room, you have to still make sure that you have a way of getting those pieces into the room. If you have narrow hallways or doors, big pieces of furniture can be a challenge. I once heard the story of a townhouse development that had some really spacious primary bedrooms, but the way they had designed the staircases, you couldn't actually get a king-size mattress up the stairs. So take lots of measurements to avoid any issues, and when all else fails, sometimes a modular sofa is just the way to go. Well, friends, this pretty much wraps up the video. Those are all of my tips and tricks for how to successfully plan a space. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope we'll see you at the next one. Bye for now.